Hey guys, Josh here. A few weeks ago, I made a video covering a Kickstarter campaign for a farming game called Gods Fabled Soil Frontier. You can watch that if you haven't already, but to summarize, I found the game pretty interesting as it proposes a more complex and engaging farming system, with mechanics like conditions where you can grow crops in any season as long as they meet the proper conditions such as moisture and sunlight, as well as an area of effect system where certain plants will change or benefit each other depending on what other crops you plant close to them. Most farming games have very simple farming mechanics, so that's really what I thought was interesting with this game and why I would like to see this project succeed. The developer has put out a few updates on Kickstarter in the last weeks, so today I would like to discuss those as we learn more about the farming, the animals, as well as the relationship systems that are planned for the game. I'll put the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description. There's a bit less than 3 days left. The goal is almost reached. The developer did give me a referral link, so if you do decide to back the game, you will be supporting my channel at the same time. But with that being said, let's take a look at all of these updates. So the first update that was posted is about farming, the most important mechanic of this game, and more specifically, composting and pests. As you farm, craft, and explore the open world, you will end up collecting a lot of organic scrap, which can be put into composting bags, and then these will transform in compost over time. When you spread the compost over your crops, it will enrich the soil, increase moisture retention, and help suppress crop diseases. Also, organic crops that are grown with natural compost rather than artificial fertilizers will benefit of a higher selling price. And they also mentioned that if you're lucky, you might get fungi to grow between your crops, which I imagine you could also harvest and sell for a profit. That's all we know about compost so far, but that sounds pretty interesting to me. The fact that you'll have to use organic scraps has the potential to tie in the open world exploration and farming together, as you'll be able to use what you find in the wild to benefit your crops. I'm also interested in the idea of crops diseases because that's not something we see in a lot of farming games. I don't think I've ever seen that feature actually, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that will work exactly, if certain crops are maybe more prone to diseases than others, and all of the different ways to heal your crops. Since this game focuses on the farming, it looks like we'll really have to pay attention to our crops to make sure they're doing well, and that's something I found has been lacking in most farming games, so I'm really excited to see that. Next, we get to know a bit more about pests. So in this game, a small critter will try to sneak on your farm and eat your crops. Every time a critter snacks on your crops, it will lose a little bit of health until it completely dies if you don't do anything for pest prevention. You'll be able, for example, to put some repellent around your crops, and if you have a bigger farm, you will need to use more repellent. Or you could also get a slingshot and get rid of the pests that way. It looks like different types of pests may require different methods. My guess is that you'll probably be able to use fences to prevent bigger animals from coming, but you might need repellents and things for the smaller, sneakier ones. Also, most animals in this game will be tameable, including these nup rats, which are kind of like little rats. So I'm wondering what they will be good for once you tame them. If you guys have any guesses, please let me know in the comments. But speaking of animals, this is what the second update is all about. So first, the animals will have dynamic moods, which will change according to what's happening around them. For example, if animals are left in the rain or if you neglect them, they will become sad, whereas if you interact with them daily and you pet them, their happiness will increase. Moods will have an impact on how an animal behaves, how obedient they are, and the quality of items they produce. Another thing that influences how an animal behaves is their personality. For example, a bubbly animal might be easier to take care of and increase its friendship, whereas a rude animal might refuse to interact with you on certain days and might get mad more easily. A brave animal, on the other hand, could, for example, fend off pests on their own and might not mind just being out in a storm as much as the other animals. I find that in a lot of games, all of the animals tend to be the exact same. I know that some games like Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town did have a personality for the animals, but the differences were so minor, it was really hard to notice, so I'm hoping that in Soil Frontier, we really get to witness those differences, as this is an idea with a lot of potential, and it could really make taking care of your animals more fun and engaging, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that will go. Then, on a more controversial note, they revealed that by using a cleaver, you will be able to harvest animals for meat. However, this won't be required to complete the game, and the feature can be toggled on or off completely, or with specific animals you don't want to harvest by accident. I think that's a pretty good compromise. The dev actually made a poll and it was pretty divided, so hopefully this solution and the freedom of choice it offers will be fine for most players. The last update I would like to cover is all about relationships and marriage. So when I first looked at the Kickstarter campaign for this game, I wasn't sure if marriage was going to be in there or not, but now it is confirmed. The features are not fully fleshed out yet as the dev is focusing on things like farming and the other core mechanics of the game, but here's what we know so far. There will be two types of relationships, so platonic and romantic. You'll be able to have platonic relationships with all NPCs, animals, and gods. And romantic relationships will be available for the NPCs and maybe even some of the gods. So the dev has mentioned gods a few times here and there, and it's also in the title of the game. However, we don't know too much about the gods yet. I'm looking forward to seeing what that's about, and maybe if they're similar to the Harvest Goddess from the Story of Season series or something completely different. But there will be some kind of gods in this game. And also the dev mentions how they want each feature of this game to have a purpose, and the same applies to relationships. So I gotta say I really like this way of thinking because in many games, relationships don't do much except for new dialogues and cutscenes. So let's see what it will do in Gods Fabled Soul Frontier. So increasing or decreasing relationships with any entity will always open up new gameplay. It can improve, for example, the quality of animal products, unlock new storylines, new areas, new items, grant blessing from gods, lead to marriage, and more. Befriending a store owner, for example, would allow them to restock certain items or make special orders for you, allowing you to obtain unique items. There's also going to be a like and dislike system for the gifts, which is pretty standard, but what's interesting is that this will apply to animals as well and will vary depending on their personality. So it is possible, for example, that a bubbly animal will like to receive a certain treat, but a rude animal doesn't like that same treat, so you will have to take that into account, which once again is gonna make taking care of your animals more engaging. You'll also be able to hang out or go on date with NPCs, and you'll have to take into account the location and weather. For example, some characters may not like going out in the rain or going too far outside of the village, so you will have to consider these things if you don't want your date to fail and your relationship to suffer. If you have a negative relationship, villagers may start talking badly about you and your animals will refuse to give you products. One example they give is that there's going to be this journalist NPC who will often ask you about recent events happening. However, if you constantly refuse to talk to her, she might one day write a bad story about you, which would affect your relationships with the other characters as well. I think this is an idea with a lot of potential, but of course it will all depend on how it's implemented. I just hope that the NPCs are not too demanding, as that's usually not the main focus for me when I play these games, so I hope they don't start disliking or hating me just for not talking to them very often. But in any case, I'm very excited to see how all of that is done. And that's pretty much it for the updates we got for Gods Fabled Soul Frontier. Lots of interesting things. It clears up some things we were not sure about, like the marriage, and we also got to learn a bit more about how animals and farming will work. Let me know what you think of this project so far. Are you excited for this game or not? If you are, there is a link in the description to back the game on Kickstarter. Please check it out and leave a like and subscribe if you'd like me to cover more of this game in the future, and I'll see you all in the next video.